Episode 167 of Livestream Insiders. Hello, welcome to the programme. And in a few moments' time, I'm going to be persuading you to watch someone else's live stream. Plus, on the way, live streaming for good, state of social, video trains, and Facebook engagement. Plus, the newsroom, which is going to be setting up a live stream of all its staff so you can see behind the scenes. Details on all of those on the way. First of all, my friend and colleague, Krishna Day.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here for Livestream Insiders. Peter and I, as you may know if you've joined us previously, are really passionate about helping you integrate video and audio live streaming and generally using those tools in terms of helping you for your communications. That might be external comms, social selling, marketing, internal communications, for example, in terms of employee engagement or even expressing your employer brand for your recruitment that you're doing. And that's why we love to bring you examples and case studies. We've been streaming together in terms of this show. We're in our 4th year now. So we have a huge archive of experience in terms of things that we've done personally and also other case studies. So if you ever have a question about, tell me what's happening in this sector, just reach out to myself and Peter. It's chances are we've come across something. And if we haven't, we can surely give you some great ideas. We appreciate you being here live or on the replay. You might also be listening to us as an audio podcast or watching this as a video replay over on YouTube or Vimeo or anywhere else that you might catch us. I'm going to pass it back to Peter for the first story, which I think is going to be really interesting for us to learn from.
And it's kind of live streaming for good, as I mentioned at the start of the show. And again, it's on Twitch, a platform which is really kind of coming into its own. I think we've mentioned Twitch every week this year so far. And a Twitch streamer, H. Bomber Guy, raked in a whole heap of cash in donations for a children's charity by doing a weekend marathon stream. He did it by combining two of Twitch's most reliable forces, star power and charity. And when you put those together, as you know, you're going to be coming up with a real force for good. And I suppose it kind of goes to show what can happen when you set your mind to it, when you have those two elements, when you're on a really popular platform. And it certainly was a very popular stream, 57 hours, and it benefited mermaids. Now, if you haven't come across mermaids, so many charities do so much good work. This perhaps is an unusual charity in as much as it's quite new and a kind of emerging need for people to get help and support and advice, as it is for a British organisation for trans and gender non-conforming children. A situation which is becoming more and more widespread, and more people are aware of it, but that, of course, in the world that it is today, causing more and more problems for people as they start on that particular difficult journey in life. $340,000 was raised to help the good work of that particular charity. So congratulations to the streamer, congratulations for the charity, congratulations to everybody who donated money there for the Mermaids, that British charity organisation, which has now benefited to the tune of $340,000, or the British equivalent.
It was great to see that there was a case study there from the UK, and actually, at the end of the show, I'll be posting a link where you can get all the resources and articles that we're talking about today, including, in fact, if you want to go back and watch the replay of that live stream. I actually scanned through it. I didn't watch all of it because it was such a marathon event, but you can also still continue to contribute. And he got some big names. He got politicians involved. So it was really interesting in terms of seeing Twitch being used for social good. I actually want to take you through now some different pieces of research and articles that have come out in the last few weeks. Here on Livestream Insiders, we like to encourage you to think about live streaming, but live video and live audio is only one part of the video mix. And both Peter and I produce content every day in terms of video content for social and also for websites and so on. Him in his role in terms of in news, and myself in my role both in terms of educating people but also in terms of my own small business. So I think this is going to be really helpful for us all to reflect on. And the first piece of content I want to share with you is one that was a curation of tips and ideas from people who are practical and actually involved in creating video content all the time. And I was very fortunate to be invited to contribute to it. And what the organization has done, you might know them, Wave.video, or Animatron Wave is how they were first known. They are a video platform which allows you to create content for all of your social media channels. They've got a great stock of library content. If you're stuck for video content, you're not creating it all the time, as Peter does when he's out on the road. And also it allows you to put lots of customization there in terms of for your brand. But more of that later. If you want to know more about it, then feel free to reach out to me. But what I was interested about is that, and it's really quite a challenge when you've got lots of people that you invite to actually share their thoughts about trends that are going on for the year ahead in terms of social video, to actually get it down to a number of themes. And so that's what was really interesting about what they've been able to do over at Wave. And they've actually identified here in the article 8 key trends. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to run through every single piece, because I know that we're all at different stages of development in terms of using video. And that is also going to be evident from some research that I'll share at the end of this part of the segment. So I've slightly reordered the trends, but let me give you a headline of the trends that they've identified. Firstly, the video will be continuing to grow. Well, that's probably not going to be any news to most of us who are already using video in terms of in our communications. But I know that many people are still struggling to do so. So one of the big trends they said is going to be even more prevalent in 2019, really because of technology and also expectations. And that in fact, they're actually seeing that more organizations are going to be using it, from perhaps explainer videos to interviews, customer testimonials, advertising, or in fact in terms of industries who perhaps never considered using video, using it at different stages in their life cycle in terms of how they're interacting, be that customers, be that patients, be that prospective students, be that people who are volunteers, whatever your industry. So that's the first thing that they've actually talked about. The second thing that they talk about is that video will replace other forms of communication. Well, I don't think it's going to replace it completely, but we are certainly going to see more of the video content is going to be used as an integrated piece of your communications. And that's what I would personally recommend you do, integrate video into other things that you're doing. So, for example, they gave, don't necessarily just send an email, actually send a video. Let me give you a practical way that I do that. When I'm asked to give feedback on something, I'll often just, let's say it's an article, or maybe it's a web page, or perhaps it's a report that somebody's done. I'll very often, for my clients, pull out my video screen capture and actually talk them through it. It's actually much easier for them to understand that than it is if I was to try to write it out. It's also faster for me to do. However, I also complement it with a few notes as well. So I don't think video will completely take over, but it definitely is going to be a lot more used in terms of other forms of communications. So another example might be, instead of a written testimonial from a client, you might invite them to give you a video testimonial. If they don't want to be on camera, you could actually have their voice. You could have images there that represent whatever they're talking about. And of course, you could even be creating captions in those videos as well. And they said that in the article that really at every stage of the buyer's cycle, you'll actually be able to see video used more. The third trend is actually the rise of short video and vertical videos. We've definitely seen that in the last 18 months to 2 years. I'd love to know, perhaps just leave a comment saying V for vertical in terms of if you're using vertical video now. If you're not, one of the things that I comment in my response in the article is the fact that we really need to be on trend with this. For example, in Peter's organization, they have a special app that they use when they're creating video that actually gives you, him, for example, the idea of actually this is what you'd see if it was a vertical video. So if it was going to be cut for certain social channels, if it's a square video, if it's a landscape video in terms of being used, for example, on TV or on the web. So he has that benefit. Not all organizations have something as fantastic as that, but all of us can start to think about that in how we actually create it. What was interesting, they also referred back to some research from 2018, which is from eMarketer. And at that stage, they actually were saying, this is about almost a year ago now, that 2.38 billion people will be watching streaming or downloaded video content in any device. And that was in eMarketer's first ever global digital video forecast. And they said because mobile phones are the entry point for the internet in terms of in many markets, it's also the primary viewing device for actually viewing video, which I think is an interesting perspective because many of us have grown up with desktops and looking at video landscape and watching TV. But today, as they rightly say, the entry point is on a mobile device. If I think about my teenagers, they actually watch a lot of content on their mobile device. Yes, they do use an iPad as well. Of course, other tablets are available where they will watch it in landscape. But that was almost that entry into being able to use video. And so eMarketer was actually expecting that more than 3/4 of digital video viewers were going to be using their mobile phones to watch digitally streamed video content. And so therefore, that's another reason we need to be thinking about vertical video. So we certainly expect to see that rising. That might be Instagram stories, Facebook stories, Snapchat, Facebook newsfeed, and of course IGTV, Instagram TV. I'll come on to more about that later. The next area that it talks about is creating videos will become easier. And that is definitely the case. If I think about my first online video that I created back in 2005, it was so much more difficult. Whereas I can very easily create content with lots and lots of new apps. In fact, every single week, I'm testing out new apps that I can actually then incorporate or refer to in my workshops and give them as recommendations. Today, actually, I think I downloaded 5 video apps. They were all different functions that it performs for video, and I'm actually planning to write an article about my experience with those 5, which I think will be very helpful for social video. But that's just in one day. I've downloaded 5 and tested 5 apps. So it's certainly becoming much easier. And this is actually a good point in terms of other tools that are available to us. For example, it might be you prefer not to do video on your mobile device, you want to do it on desktop. A platform like Wave.video, which I've already referred to as the host of this article, that's what they've made it very easy for you to do in terms of create video on their platform. Of course, there's lots of other tools that you can actually use, like Animoto and many more beyond. Adobe Spark, they actually have Adobe Spark Video. Lots and lots of different tools have been available now for us to also create video very quickly for social in terms of on our desktop. There's many more, so don't see those 3 just as an endorsement of those 3. As I said, there's many more video tools, and perhaps you want to comment in terms of in the comments if there's a preferred platform that you like, both in terms of an app on your phone or an app on your desktop that you like to use for creating social video. The next is videos need to be optimized for every platform. And just thinking about one piece of video and let's just put a border or top and bottom and that will actually work for an Instagram story. Or let's just crop the middle out of a piece of content to actually that will work as a square video for Instagram. Or let's just actually put a broader border on something and we'll actually throw that up onto YouTube. Really, I think we all need to start to think about what is relevant for those different platforms. I create slightly different content. I don't do as much as I should in my own small business, but I do try to think about, okay, what's the video that I might use on Twitter versus what's the video I might use, say, in terms of on YouTube. And so that's really important for us in terms of getting that engagement with our content. The next area that they looked at was personalized and videos, and I certainly think that's going to be more and more important also in terms of getting more interactivity. A way that you might do personalization is a personal thank you to somebody. I actually see a lot of people doing that, for example, in terms of on Twitter, or, you know, let's say you can do a mention to somebody on Twitter to say thanks for engaging. And I actually have had that even from big brands who've actually taken the time to create me literally a 10 to 15 second video piece of content. Again, there's lots and lots of apps that you could use to be able to do that, or you could just record straight into your device if that's your preferred way of doing so. The next one is about collaboration with influencers. I think this is an interesting one from an influencer perspective. If you are an influencer and you haven't got to grips with video, you need to make sure you do now. And that includes the story format, because I'm seeing a lot more organizations looking to do more collaborations. Of course, we've also had some recent news. If you're looking at in the UK, you might have come across this in terms of celebrities have just been slapped across the wrist about not disclosing their use of or their partnerships with brands, and they should definitely know better, because of course there are advertising standards authority guidelines that we need to comply with. That might be different guidelines in different countries. So make sure you do disclose, but I definitely think as an influencer, you might want to up your video game, because that is definitely where organizations are looking to, in terms of they know that they need to increase their use of video, and therefore if you can partner with them in terms of video content. So I was watching in my Instagram stories today, which I kind of scanned through for case studies, and I saw a great example of, there was one from a retailer in Ireland, and they actually had somebody going in to do, they were an influencer, they were doing an in-store demonstration and a book signing, and they actually were using their content in their Instagram story to tell you about what was going on. There's lots of other things they could have done to actually get more engagement on it, but again, that was just a little example of, it wasn't the brand creating the content, it was the person who was doing the visiting, who was, as I said, the author, who was going to be in store, and it was that content that was used on the brand's Instagram story. And the final area that it looked at is actually new forms of video, and that might be virtual reality, live video. That live video got a few mentions, certainly in terms of in the article, and also other forms of video such as 360 video. We've talked about all of those here. I was reflecting on this, that though I know that, for example, in terms of VR it gets everybody excited. But I still, when I'm asking around, see very few people who are experimenting, who are using it, who are watching it. And also lots of people don't have devices still that actually allow it to be seen. If you're on an older form of an iPhone, which I know a lot of mobile content creators are still using, you actually can't do any VR. You can't watch any VR. You can't download apps that actually are VR enabled onto those devices. Of course, at some stage, they'll become defunct. But I think that's just also important to remember. Think about your audience and about what's going to make sense to them. It's great to be onto all the latest trends, but actually it may not be relevant. So that's really interesting in terms of some perspectives there. You can read my thoughts in the article. I certainly made a reference to artificial intelligence, which I didn't see anybody else referencing, and certainly in terms of for things like live captioning, I think we're going to see that happen much easier than it is now. For example, in live video, there are apps available that we can certainly use on iPhone to live caption when you're doing a pre-recorded piece of content. So you speak, it captions, you can adjust it in real time. There's a few apps to do that. But also in terms of making it available in our live videos, I think we're going to be seeing some of that happening. Hopefully, that I would expect that in the year ahead. Let me just wrap this up in terms of two other pieces of content that, if you're interested in social video, that you might want to be interested in taking a look at. The first was a piece of content from BuzzSumo, and it's a great platform. They've got a free version as well, and also if you're using it for influencer marketing, it can really help you in terms of finding influencers to interact with. But in terms of BuzzSumo, they actually looked at what gets the most engagement in terms of in Facebook. So that was, of course, not going to be news to most of us who've been using Facebook for some time, is that video is going to get you the most engagement. And we also know that live video has been helping a lot of people get interaction and engagement as well, because of the real-time commenting that people can actually make there in Facebook. Of course, that's the same on other platforms where there is live video as well. But it just did make me wonder, why is it, though, that people are still not using video? I can't even tell you how many Facebook pages I've looked at in the course of this last week, just in terms of research that I do behind the scenes for work that I'm doing, and yet so few video. And where there is video, it's not great video at all, and certainly wouldn't encourage me to interact with it. What was then interesting, though, is there's a piece of content that was then produced by Buffer, really extensive piece of content, which I think you'll find interesting to take a look at. And that's about the state of social. Now, I have to just say that if you're a large organization, this probably isn't as relevant for you, because approaching 50% of the people who contributed to the research were actually small businesses, like 10 people or less. And that was about how often is your business publishing video content. And 36.7% of the people who responded in their research said they were doing it monthly. So we've already said that if you're actually looking to win on Facebook, you really need to be creating video content frequently. And video is going to be performing better for you. Of course, you might be using advertising as well to support your video content or other posts on Facebook. But once a month, that isn't going to be enough for us. But I think it's interesting to say, well, what are other people doing? And therefore, you can benchmark yourself. I can benchmark myself against this. The next area that they looked at was, which platform does your business post video content onto? 81% of people, just over 81% of people were posting video content on Facebook. And as I said, this is the Buffer State of Social report that I actually pulled this from. 62% were using YouTube. Personally, I think that's over-ranked. I certainly don't see that percentage of businesses using YouTube, and certainly not regularly, in terms of, again, the YouTube channels that I go back to and review, and you can then see the other platforms. Interestingly, 32%, over 32% of organizations are using LinkedIn video. I've certainly seen that a lot more prevalent since that was introduced a year or so ago. And then I was interested, of course, about live broadcasts. I think this is overrated as well. Personally, I have not experienced, when I'm working with people, that actually approaching 58% of people having used, 42% of people having used live video. If I had a group of people in front of me who are marketing professionals, who are PR professionals, communications professionals, I can guarantee you I've never had 42% of people in the room tell me that they've been using live video. So it's interesting that that's what they're saying, but Peter and I will continue to encourage you to think about using live video, because there's a huge opportunity there. Instagram TV, in terms of a lot of organizations still not using it, and I've actually done a little bit of use of it, not very much, and certainly not exclusive content created for Instagram TV. But we see there that 72% of people who are participating in the research for Buffer actually said they've got no plans to use Instagram TV. Now, whether we will change our opinions based on what Instagram, Facebook plan to do in the year ahead, that may well be the case. And then just coming back to the research that was from BuzzSumo, often people will say, what's the optimal length of content for video content? And same as a podcast, I will always say, well, as much as it takes you to tell a story, but people do like to know, well, what does the stats say? And because of BuzzSumo doing this research, they could identify that 3 to 4 minutes seemed to be the sweet spot. Now, always take this kind of research with a bit of a pinch of salt, because of course your sector may be different, your content is going to be different from other people. You've got to work out what's relevant for you. And if you look at things like for live video, where Facebook will say, actually, you should be producing, much longer pieces of content in terms of 10 minutes, 20 minutes of content. We looked at a case study last week where people, the organization that we explored and were looking at, were using live video, and that was a news organization, and most of their content was under 4 minutes for live video. So, it was working for them. So please just take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. It will be, of course, a helpful guide for us all. And what did that mean in terms of that 3 to 4 minutes, in terms of breaking it down further? Well, if you really want to be accurate, 180 to 200 seconds, that's 3 minutes to 3.2 minutes. 3 minutes, 20 seconds, I should say, in terms of seemed to be the sweet spot there in terms of the research that BuzzSumo undertook. As I said, I think some useful data for us all to reflect on as we're thinking about our plans for using video in the year ahead. And I hope that provides you with some useful reading. As I said, I scanned it through to give you some highlights of what was relevant for us to talk about here, but there's so much more information, particularly in the BuzzSumo research and of course in the Buffer research, because they go broader than video, and video was the topic, rightly so, for the wave.video article that I first referred to. I'm going to pass it back to Peter, and I want to also check to see if you've got any questions in the comments that have been coming through as well, or any observations that you've got.
If you've ever wanted to know how a newsroom operates, but you've never had a chance to actually see behind the scenes at NBC or CBS or ABC, whichever ABC that happens to be, because I know there are several ABCs around the world, or indeed the BBC, where I've, of course, perhaps been fortunate enough to see behind the scenes. Well, Sky News in the UK, because of course there are various Sky Newses around the world, might have something which will be of interest to you, because they are going to be installing all sorts of cameras and microphones around the newsroom. 32 cameras and microphones, and it's all for a special event to mark their 30th anniversary. And obviously privacy concerns there, maybe kind of security issues as well. If someone's got something taped to their desk, a list of phone numbers or something like that, and also overhearing the conversations. But that's going to be really interesting, because of course I'm involved in that kind of broadcast area myself, as you probably know, to see how another newsroom operates. So it's that 30th anniversary project, and also what they're going to be doing is obviously with so many cameras and streams, they're going to be producing that. So they're going to be watching and only streaming what they want to stream. So they'll be choosing those different cameras and the content from those before it's actually put out. Between 5:30 in the morning and 10:30 at night, they're calling it Sky News Raw. And as I say, all to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Sky News.
I thought it was really interesting, Peter, that I picked up a story by a US organization, news organization. It's actually in the curation for today's show, and their reaction, because they were newsreaders or kind of in the show, said, like, why on earth would you want to do it? So they were kind of thinking, I guessed, I hope we don't do it over here in terms of in our news station. So yeah, it's certainly a little bit different, and it's probably a good reason to get your office tidy, or your desk space tidied up, so that it looks clean and efficient there. In terms of you need to make sure that you know what you're doing. But to be honest, in terms of live streams going on, we've seen that with other organisations. That I did an article a while back about a best practice case study of a university using live streaming, and they did it from the call centre. So when people were phoning in on the day of their exam results, and they were looking to get a place at this particular university. They had a great live stream that was going on, and you saw all the people in the background, so they would have had to be well briefed to know that they were going to be on camera, so to make sure that their most flattering side was on camera. With that, I'm going to bring it to a halt in terms of the show. But Peter, why don't you wrap up for us in terms of when people can expect to find us here again?
Boy, oh boy, we've covered a lot of ground this week. We'll be back at the same time next week, 7 o'clock GMT, UK and Ireland time. And we hope that you will be in the same place to watch us, bringing you the latest advances in live streaming, the tech, the tips, the different platforms, and of course, where we come into our own, those case studies, which we try and pick apart and see what worked and why it worked as well. More case studies, which I know we've already got waiting in the wings. We can't wait to bring them to you. Same time, same place, next week, 7 o'clock GMT. I'll be back then, together with Krishna. Have a great week. Bye-bye for now.